to top this chapter off, we're going to close this chapter with this video. I want to talk about details because as the saying goes, the quote goes, the devil's on the details, right? Like we can get something that looks very nice. Like you probably, if you've never sculpted or modeled cloths before, just getting to this result is already a good like improvement, but the devil's on the details. So we really need to push this to make sure that it looks as nice as possible. So let's start with the mask because this is going to allow me to show you what I mean by this. Usually when you have clothings like this, especially on the side or at the end of the cloth, you're going to have a little bit of a line. And that line is important because this, I believe it's called in English hem. And this line is important because this line makes sure that your cloth does not go like wrong, like does not get destroyed from use. So it kind of reinforces the edge of your fabric so that you don't get all of this like loose threads as you use it and wear it. So we need to add that. If we add that, we're going to make sure that this whole thing looks a little bit nicer. Let's start on this bottom side right here because it's the easiest one. I'm going to grab both lines right here. I'm going to right click, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset as internal line. And usually 5 millimeters is good. In this case, just to make it a little bit more exaggerated, I'm going to go 10 millimeters and hit OK. What this will do, as you can see, is it will create an internal line. And we've mentioned this before. Internal lines allows us to kind of like reinforce the flow or change the flow of the edges so that we get a nicer detail. Now on this one right here, I'm going to do a cut and sew to get a separate piece from that sort of like trim right there. And finally, I'm going to grab these two objects. Do you guys remember this from the tablecloth thing that we did before, right? We're going to right click and we're going to do a layer clone over or under. Now, what's the difference between these two? Because we didn't really explore that much. There's really not much of a difference. One will place it on top, the other one will place it lower. I usually use the one that looks or makes the most sense for the specific pattern. So in this particular pattern, for instance, if I do layer clone over, I'm going to have to move the pattern all the way to the top of the mask, and it just like looks wrong. So I'm going to use this layer clone under instead. I'm just going to have it right there, right under the object, so that we can have both elements in the same piece. And you know that we're going to get this sort of effect. Now the magic happens when we grab this outer edge right here and we change the particle distance to a small number, right? So something like a 3 maybe, and we make it a little bit bigger. That's the secret. That's the most important secret. Let me just make sure that I'm just selecting this guy and this guy. As you can see, it's selecting the ones on the bottom. So I'm going to select the ones on the bottom. I'm going to right click and we're going to do a remove linked editing. There we go. I'm just going to select this one right here. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. What that will do is it will add extra fabric to that border right there. And when we simulate, it's going to puff out a little bit more. And even though that puffiness might not look like much, it's really, really important, especially if you're a character artist and you're going to be doing some of this bakes later on, right? Like all of that detail that you were seeing there could eventually be captured on a bake. And it's just going to make your assets look way, way, way more professional, because it's very weird that you're just going to cut the fabric and that's it. There's usually a finish to the fabric. Now, let's do the same thing over here. However, over here, things are a little bit more complicated. Why? Because we got a bunch of different lines. So first, I'm going to grab all of the lines that are around the eyes, which are this one, this one, this one, and this one, I believe, and this one, of course. There we go. First advice that I would give you, if you have more points than you need, just delete them. Like there's no need to have extra points if they're not needed. So just deleting some of these ones, like this one, for instance, we can delete. And then this one, we can convert to a curve point and we're going to get a very similar result. That's going to make it a little bit easier to use the tools. Now we select both edges, right click, and we're going to again offset as internal line. And as you can see, we're going to get the exact same result, hit OK. And very important, as a force of habit, I like to go and say extend trim and add point to pattern outline, just to make sure that it is actually like doing the thing that we expect it to do. Once we have that, we can select both of them, or actually all of these lines right here, all of this pattern, all of this. Right click and cut and sew. There we go. And of course, we're going to grab all of them again. Right click, and we're going to do a layer clone over in this case. Why? Because it's going to be on top of it. So it's easier for me to remember that this guy, it's over because it's on top. We right click and we're going to do a remove linked editing. And this one, since it's the one that's on top, it's the one that we're going to see. That's the one that we're going to make a little bit bigger. And we're going to change the particle distance to something like a 1. If we now do the simulation, what's going to happen is that piece of clothing will have an extra border right there around our object. Going to look very, very nice, and it's going to look way, way more professional because we're adding that little extra detail. But we don't end there. Let me show you another one like this, guys, right here. As you guys know, I was looking at this sort of like Plague Doctor option, and I really like it. So we're gonna go with this sort of like inflated patterns, not super exaggerated like this ones. I mean, we can puff them out a little bit more if we add more fabric. But for now, I want to keep them a little bit like slim. Actually, let me pause. No, I don't want to pause. Let's do it. I was gonna pause and just show it how to do it, but let's just do it here very quickly. So first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to this patterns right here, and I'm gonna make them a lot longer. Probably not as long. Then we're gonna have some issues with the. There we go, something like that. Perfect. And then what we can do is we can select this guys right here and just freeze them. Right, freeze both of them, of course. So Control K. And now we grab this guy right here. And if we grab the transform, let's stop the simulation. We can just push this down. Push. Over here in the 2D view, I'm gonna push both of these guys up. Then I'm gonna grab this guy right here. Just push it down a little bit. That's gonna give me more fabric and therefore more wrinkles. So if we simulate, there we go. It's gonna look a little bit puffier here on the side. If we want to make it even more puffier, as we did with the pants, we're gonna have to change the curvature of the object. I really don't want to do it. I think this is more than enough. It would be very uncomfortable, I would say, for a medic to have to deal with this. Kind of looks like a ninja right now, but don't worry. With all of the accessories and everything else, it's gonna start looking more like a doctor. One thing that we could add though are this kind of like belts on the upper side of the arm. I feel like that's a good idea, but maybe we'll add those at the very end. So now, how can we add these lines that we see right here? These are like internal lines. That means that there was like strips of fabric that were stitched together to generate this effect. You see this a lot in like gesture suits and things like that. So I'm gonna grab this guy right here and this guy right here, right click, and then we're gonna use this option called offset as internal line along curve. It's very important that we use that one. Why? Because if we don't do a long curve, you're gonna get straight lines all across the thing and things are not gonna look straight. This is a very quick anecdote that I'm gonna share with you guys. When I was during the pandemic, my wife and we watched a lot of shows, as everyone else in the world did, and one of the ones that we watched the most was Project Runway. If you remember this, if you haven't seen this, it's a reality show about fashion. So people are competing against each other to make like very cool dresses, like high fashion dresses and stuff. And one of the things that they criticized the most on the contestants, and we're always having fun talking about it, was the fact that whenever they use patterns like this checkerboard pattern or like this pattern right here, a lot of the contestants sometimes messed up and the patterns were not aligning properly. So you would have, especially on the seam lines, things were not aligning properly and you would have like skewed patterns, and they were like, that's the proof of who's like actually paying attention to the patterns and who's not. And this is exactly what's going to happen here. Anyone might think that, oh, well, I got both of these options right here and I want to divide this into like 8 sections. 8 seems like a good number. I'm just going to offset as internal line, and we're going to say 8 offsets. Yeah, but if you do this, as you can see, the lines, they're not going to align properly, and therefore you're not going to get the result that you want. So right click, offset internal line along curved, and then over here, we're going to say 7. Why 7? Because we want 8 divisions, and 7 lines will give us 8 divisions. And we just hit OK. And as you can see now, we got this very like nice frayed sort of effect on the whole fabric. Again, right click, we're going to extend trim and add point to pattern outline, very important. And then we're going to select all of the elements right here, all of the lines, and we're going to do a cut and sew. Or actually, you don't really need to cut and sew, to be honest. If you cut and sew, you're going to have a little bit more control over the color, for instance, of each specific pattern. But for this particular one, we don't need to do that. I can just do control or right click. We're going to do a layer clone over, have it over here. And that's it. So now when the thing is, when we do this, every single internal line will also be stitched to the internal line on the underlying pattern. So when we do this sort of like simulation, as you can see right here, we're going to start getting the effect. We can go over here and we can not show internal lines. You're going to be able to see right now. I know it's a little bit difficult due to the color of the cloth, but you should be able to see the line that we're creating for the garment. Now, how can we make this better? Of course, we can grab this guy right here. Let's remove the linked editing, and we're just going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm actually going to make it a little bit longer as well. It's going to give us a couple more extra wrinkles, and I'm going to reduce the particle distance to something like 15, or let's try 10 for now. It's more particle distance, more wrinkles as well. Now, when we simulate, what's going to happen is we're going to start getting all of this sort of like padded effect that we have right there. And not only that, do you remember pressure, right? We saw pressure earlier on. We can add a little bit of pressure. We can be like, hey, yeah, this one's going to have a number 1 of pressure. And since it's stitched to the rest of the element, it's going to inflate a little bit. It's going to look like this sort of like puffy slift. And look at how nice this whole thing looks. You want more wrinkles? No problem. We can even go here to the shrinkage weft. Remember, weft is, weft is like this. So it's a warp in this case. And we can change this to 110. And if we do that, it's going to be even looser, and therefore it's going to be way puffier. So depending on the sort of effect that you want, that's kind of like a padded sort of like a cushion thing, you're going to be able to get your effect. In this case, I think that the weft is too much. I also think that the pressure might be too much. So let's remove the pressure. And I do think this is a little bit too big or too long. So let's bring it down a little bit there. There we go. So yeah, that's pretty much how you do it. That's one way to add this sort of effect. Now, of course, on this other side, since we removed the linked editing, seems like we lost this one as well. So let me do this again. Delete that one. We're going to grab these two guys, right click, layer clone over. There we go. And then we remove linked editing. We push these guys up just a little bit. And we make them a little bit bigger. Again, just it's kind of like a 10%, 5%, just something so that we get a couple more wrinkles. And we change the particle distance to 10 so that we can actually see the wrinkles. Now, this is one of those things that it might not seem like much. Like, why are we doing this? Like, isn't this like extra geometry, extra particles, and extra everything? Yes, but we need this. We need them if we want to have this sort of effect that you see right here. That's sort of like padded, sort of like lines. Some of you might be like, well, couldn't we add those inside of, I don't know, let's say like a ZBrush, right? Like we just sculpted, or even in texture. Yes, you can. But if you're not doing games, if you're doing, I don't know, like 3D printing or something, you definitely want to have this detailed kind of like in geometry so that you can get the best possible effect. Now, if at any point this thing starts behaving a little bit weird, like this over thing, you can use an option, like especially when it's trying to like collide with the bottom garment, you can use this option called superimpose over, which is gonna force it to be on the outside. So if you see a lot of like fighting between the layers, like one layer wants to be on top of the other, just grab the one that's over. That's why it's very important to make sure that you know where things are and push it so that it's on the top side. So let's stop the simulation right now. I'm gonna grab this guys because I definitely wanna get a little bit more puffiness similar to the concept, and you can see that this point starts a little bit higher. So I'm going to grab both of those elements, Control K, and we're going to simulate. Now, this is another question that I get asked often is like, where, like how are we going to deal with like symmetry of the objects, right? Because right now the objects are not symmetrical. The one side of the garment is going to look a little bit different than the other side. And that will depend on each specific pipeline. Like in certain pipelines, yes, you will have asymmetry. So your object will look, well, as the name implies, asymmetrical. But in other sort of like pipelines, your object might look like good. So I really like how this looks right there. What I can do is I'm going to freeze this. So this guy and this guy, Control K again. And then let's keep running the simulation. I'm going to use this simulation or this time to fix this one right here. Try to make it look properly. You can see that one of the issues that we have with those elements is that we have very like, the particle distance is not great. So I'm going to bring the particle distance down to 5. As you can see, that makes it a lot easier for the software to find where these things are supposed to be. If there comes a point where not even that is helping, sometimes just like resetting the 3D element might be the best option. But in this case, that seems to be doing the trick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to keep pushing it up. So I really like how this thing looks right there. And if I really like that one, I can just freeze this one, go back to this one, and unfreeze it. So that way the simulations is going to have this sort of like scrunched of the fabric right there. And the other one's going to be normal. Because eventually we're going to have the gloves, right? And the gloves are going to go, they're going to be like long sleeve gloves, similar to what we have right here. So not too much problem. Let me do this real quick and I'll show you the result. And there we go. So as you can see, this character is asymmetrical. So in this case, this one is a little bit higher than this one right here. In games, again, depending on the production, sometimes you will have an asymmetrical character, and that does require a little bit of extra work in retopology, in rigging, in animation, in pretty much every department, but you get a cooler result. And sometimes you're going to be like, yeah, just cut one of the arms and mirror it to the other side. So even though we're doing both sides asymmetrical right here, the director might just pick which one he likes the most, and we're going to just mirror it to the other side on the high poly. So yeah, this is pretty much it, my friends. Again, I do think I want to add this belt right there. So let's very quickly do it. How would you do it? Actually, I'm not going to do it. I want you guys to do it. I'm going to do it on my own. So you're going to see it on the next video, but I wanted this to be like a small little homework for you. How would you add a belt that hugs at this surface right here so we get that extra puffiness? Let me know how you did it on the questions or in the comments, or of course in our Discord channel. And yeah, I'll see you back on the next one. Bye-bye.